She was a tenacious black investigative reporter on the cusp of exposing a police corruption scandal when the very cop she was investigating decided to silence her. He arrested her on bogus charges during a live broadcast, a smug display of power meant to discredit and intimidate. He never dreamed her network would keep the cameras rolling, broadcasting his blatant abuse of authority, his fabricated evidence, and his desperate lies, live to a horrified nation, igniting an inferno of outrage that would consume his career. Welcome, viewers, to a story where the hunter becomes the hunted, live on air. This is a gripping account of a courageous journalist targeted for her pursuit of truth, and how the power of the lens turned an act of oppression into a public spectacle of self-destruction. If stories of media power, unyielding journalism, and explosive confrontations with corruption captivate you, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us share these vital narratives of justice prevailing. Thank you for tuning in. Ava Thompson was a name that made corrupt officials sweat and whistleblowers feel safe. At 35, she was the lead investigative reporter for Channel 8 News in the sprawling, politically charged city of Viridia, a rising star known for her fearless deep dives into the city's underbelly. Ava wasn't just a talking head. She was a relentless digger, a meticulous researcher, and a gifted storyteller who could unravel complex webs of deceit and present them to her viewers with compelling clarity. Her investigations had toppled city council members, exposed corporate malfeasance, and given voice to a slew of marginalized communities. She was a black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated field, and she had fought her way to the top through sheer talent, grit, and an unshakable commitment to journalistic ethics. Her current investigation, one she'd been working on for months, was her most dangerous yet. A deep dive into a pattern of evidence tampering, extortion, and excessive force within a specialized unit of the Viridia Police Department, led by the notoriously volatile and allegedly corrupt Sergeant Vincent "Vinny" Moretti. Sergeant Moretti was a dinosaur from a bygone era of policing, a man who believed that might made right and that street justice was more effective than due process. His unit, the Citywide Anti-Crime Task Force, CAT, operated with a level of autonomy that bordered on lawlessness, often producing impressive arrest statistics that masked a brutal, rights-violating methodology. Moretti was known for his explosive temper, his vindictive nature, and his deep-seated resentment of any external scrutiny, especially from liberal media types like Ava Thompson. He knew Ava was sniffing around his unit. He'd felt the heat of her inquiries, the discomfort of her persistent questions to his reluctant superiors. He saw her not as a journalist doing her job, but as a personal enemy, a threat to his carefully constructed empire of intimidation and illicit gains. Ava's hidden power was multifaceted. It was her sharp intellect, her journalistic tenacity, her unblemished reputation for integrity, and the unwavering support of her news director, David Lee, a man who believed fiercely in the power of investigative journalism and was willing to back his reporters to the hilt. Crucially, it was also the omnipresent eye of her camera crew, her loyal cameraman Ben Carter and sound tech Maria Flores, who were not just colleagues but trusted friends, willing to follow her into any metaphorical and sometimes literal lion's den. And, of course, it was the immense reach of Channel 8 News, a major network affiliate with millions of viewers across the tri-state area. Sergeant Moretti was about to learn that trying to silence Ava Thompson wasn't just a bad idea. It was an act of career suicide, broadcast live in high definition. The Viridia City Hall was a hive of activity. A controversial rezoning bill, one that Ava's investigation had linked to potential kickbacks involving Sergeant Moretti's unit and certain city developers, was up for a critical vote. Ava and her crew were there, set up for a live shot on the plaza in front of City Hall, scheduled to go on air during the 6 p.m. newscast with an explosive update on her investigation. She had obtained leaked documents, damning financial records, and an on-the-record interview with a terrified whistleblower from within Moretti's own unit. The story was about to break wide open, and she knew Moretti would be furious, desperate. As Ben adjusted his camera and Maria checked sound levels, Ava did a final review of her notes, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and a familiar pre-broadcast focus. She was aware of a heightened police presence around City Hall, ostensibly for crowd control related to the rezoning vote, but she noticed several members of Moretti's CAT unit, including Moretti himself, lurking near the periphery, their eyes fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. It was a clear attempt at intimidation, but Ava refused to be rattled. She was a professional and she had a job to do. 30 seconds to live, Ava. David Lee's voice crackled in her earpiece from the studio. Ava took a deep breath, her gaze locking onto the camera lens. "Good evening, Viridia," she began, her voice clear and authoritative as the Live graphic appeared on screen. "Tonight, Channel 8 News has uncovered compelling evidence in our ongoing investigation into alleged corruption within the VPD's citywide anti-crime task force. Sources within the department and financial records obtained exclusively by this station indicate a disturbing pattern of—" She never got to finish her sentence. Sergeant Moretti, his face a mask of contorted rage, chose that exact moment to make his move. Flanked by two of his largest, most intimidating officers, he strode directly into the live shot, deliberately positioning himself between Ava and her camera. "All right, Thompson," Moretti snarled, his voice a low, menacing growl clearly picked up by Ava's lavalier microphone. "This little sideshow of yours is over. You're under arrest." Ava, though momentarily stunned by his audacity, reacted with professional composure. "Sergeant Moretti, on what grounds am I under arrest?" she asked, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving his. Ben, her cameraman, instinctively kept rolling, his lens tight on the unfolding drama. "For obstructing governmental administration, resisting arrest, and inciting a riot with your slanderous, inflammatory lies." Moretti spat out a litany of baseless, almost laughable charges. He gestured vaguely towards a small group of protesters on the far side of the plaza who were chanting anti-corruption slogans, implying Ava was somehow responsible for their presence. "Sergeant, I am a credentialed journalist conducting a live news report in a public space," Ava countered, her voice firm. "I am not obstructing anyone, nor am I inciting anything other than civic awareness. You are interfering with a lawful broadcast and a legitimate journalistic investigation. This is a clear violation of First Amendment rights." Moretti's eyes narrowed into slits. He was losing control, and he knew it. But he was too deep in to back down, especially with his own men watching, and though he didn't fully grasp it yet, with millions of viewers witnessing his meltdown. "I'm the law here, sweetheart, not your pretty press pass," he sneered. "You've been warned, Thompson. You've been poking your nose where it doesn't belong for too long. Now you're going to pay the price." He made a sharp gesture to his officers. "Cuff her and seize that camera. It's evidence." The two CAT officers moved to grab Ava. Ben Carter, her cameraman, instinctively tried to shield his camera, shouting, "You can't do this. We're live. The whole city is watching." Moretti shoved Ben violently, sending him stumbling back. "I said, seize that camera," he roared. One officer lunged for the camera while the other grabbed Ava's arm, twisting it painfully behind her back. "Sergeant Moretti, this is an unlawful arrest. You are assaulting a journalist on live television," Ava cried out, her voice a mixture of pain and outrage. But she did not resist physically. She knew the power was in the image. in the broadcast. "Shut up!" Moretti yelled, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and foul. "You're not a journalist, you're a troublemaker, and your little broadcast career is over." He personally snapped the handcuffs on Ava's wrists, yanking them cruelly tight. In the Channel 8 newsroom, chaos had erupted. David Lee, Ava's news director, was shouting into the control room, "Keep those cameras rolling. Don't you dare cut away. Get a wide shot. Get the other crews there. This is the story. Moretti is self-destructing live on air." He was also on another line to the network's high-powered First Amendment attorneys. Sergeant Moretti, in his arrogant, hate-fueled rage, had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He thought he was silencing a reporter. Instead, he had just handed her the biggest story of her life, and he was its villain, his crime of corruption and abuse of power being broadcast live to a horrified and rapidly mobilizing audience. The camera, his enemy, had become his accuser, and the entire city, the entire nation, was about to become his jury. The reckoning for Sergeant Vincent Moretti was not just coming, it was being televised. The scene on the plaza in front of Viridia City Hall devolved into a chaotic tableau of disbelief and outrage, all broadcast live to a captive television audience. Ava Thompson, her wrists cuffed tightly behind her back, stood with a defiant dignity, even as Sergeant Moretti and his officers roughly manhandled her. Ben Carter, her cameraman, though shaken from Moretti's shove, had scrambled back to his position, his lens unwavering, capturing every moment of his colleague's unlawful arrest. Maria Flores, the sound technician, though visibly terrified, kept her boom mic expertly positioned, ensuring every word of Moretti's tirade and Ava's calm but firm protests were crystal clear. "You're making a monumental mistake, Sergeant," Ava stated, her voice carrying clearly despite the surrounding din. "This is an abuse of power, a blatant attempt to suppress a news story that implicates you and your unit in serious corruption. Every person watching this broadcast can see what you are doing." Moretti, his face flushed a deep, apoplectic purple, seemed momentarily taken aback by her continued composure, and perhaps by the dawning, uncomfortable awareness of the live camera still pointed directly at him. But he was too committed to his course of action, too consumed by his rage, to retreat. "She's resisting," he bellowed, a desperate attempt to reframe the narrative. "She's a threat to public order. Get her in the car." He shoved Ava towards a waiting patrol vehicle, his actions unnecessarily rough. In the Channel 8 studio, news director David Lee was a whirlwind of controlled fury and decisive action. "Keep that main feed live," he commanded his control room staff. "Patch it through to network. I want every affiliate we have picking this up. Get legal on the line with the mayor's office, the police commissioner, the DA. I want Moretti's badge by midnight." He was also coordinating with other Channel 8 crews, dispatching them to City Hall to provide wider coverage and to try and get interviews with city officials as they reacted to the unfolding scandal. The newsroom, usually a hive of deadline-driven energy, was now supercharged with a singular, outraged focus. This wasn't just another story. This was an attack on one of their own, an attack on the freedom of the press. And they were going to bring the full power of their network to bear. The impact on the viewing public was instantaneous and profound. Social media exploded. The hashtags Free Ava Thompson and Moretti's Corrupt began trending nationally within minutes. Viewers flooded the Channel 8 switchboard and the Viridia Police Department's non-emergency lines with furious calls, demanding Ava's immediate release and Moretti's arrest. Other news outlets, both local and national, began to pick up the live feed, their commentators expressing shock and outrage at the blatant abuse of power unfolding before their eyes. City officials, caught completely off guard by the live broadcast, of a police sergeant arresting a prominent investigative reporter in the middle of her own newscast were thrown into a state of panicked damage control. Mayor Janice Albright, who had often clashed with Ava Thompson over her critical reporting but also respected her tenacity, was reportedly horrified. The police commissioner, a man Moretti had long considered an ally, or at least a pliant superior, suddenly found himself in an untenable position. The optics were catastrophic. The city of Viridia looked like a banana republic, its police force out of control. Back on the plaza, as Moretti's officers tried to force Ava into the back of a cruiser, a crowd of onlookers, including many of the protesters Moretti had accused Ava of inciting, began to surge forward, their voices raised in a chorus of shame and let her go. The situation was rapidly escalating from a wrongful arrest into a potential riot, ironically, one of Moretti's own making. Other VPD officers, not part of Moretti's CAT unit, began to arrive, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dismay as they tried to understand the scene. They saw a respected journalist in handcuffs, a furious crowd, and Sergeant Moretti, a known hothead, at the center of it all, looking increasingly unhinged. It was at this critical juncture that Captain Isabella Rossi, the highest-ranking uniformed OPD officer at City Hall, for the rezoning vote detail, arrived on the scene. Rossi was a veteran cop, a woman known for her calm head, her integrity, and her adherence to protocol. She had no love lost for Moretti, whose strong-arm tactics she privately deplored. She took one look at the chaotic scene, Ava Thompson in cuffs, the incensed crowd, Moretti ranting, and her face hardened. "Sergeant Moretti!" Captain Rossi's voice cut through the din, sharp and authoritative. "What in God's name is going on here? Stand down your men immediately." Moretti whirled around, his face contorted. "Captain Rossi, this woman, Thompson, she was inciting a riot, obstructing my officers. She's under arrest." "Inciting a riot, Sergeant?" Rossi's eyebrow arched with skepticism as she surveyed the scene, noting the multiple cameras still rolling, the largely peaceful though angry crowd, and Ava Thompson, who, even in handcuffs, projected an air of professional outrage rather than criminal intent. "It looks to me like you're the one creating a public disturbance. On what specific articulable grounds did you arrest this journalist, in the middle of a live broadcast, no less?" Moretti began to sputter his litany of trumped-up charges, but Rossi cut him off. "I saw the beginning of that broadcast, Sergeant. I saw no incitement. I saw a reporter doing her job. I also see multiple witnesses and cameras recording your every move. You are creating a major incident here, Moretti, one that is going to have severe repercussions for you and for this department." She turned to one of her own sergeants. "Relieve Sergeant Moretti of the prisoner. Take Ms. Thompson into the City Hall security office. Uncuff her, offer her water, and get a statement from her about this arrest." She then fixed Moretti with a glare that could have melted steel. "Sergeant Moretti, you are to report to my ad hoc command post inside City Hall immediately. Do not speak to anyone, do not touch your radio, and you better have a damn good explanation for this circus." The intervention of Captain Rossi, a respected officer acting with clear authority and common sense, was a pivotal moment. It de-escalated the immediate confrontation on the plaza, though the damage Moretti had inflicted was already immense and irreversible. Ava was escorted with professional courtesy into City Hall. The crowd, seeing this, let out a collective cheer, though their anger towards Moretti remained palpable. Sergeant Moretti, his face now ashen, realizing that his attempt to silence Ava Thompson had backfired in the most spectacular public way imaginable, had no choice but to comply with Captain Rossi's order. As he walked towards City Hall, a broken man, he could hear the distant but unmistakable sound of news helicopters approaching. The hidden power of the media, the power he had so arrogantly sought to crush, was now fully mobilized against him, and its spotlight was relentless, unforgiving, and broadcast live to the world. His career wasn't just over, it was being publicly autopsied. The scene inside City Hall was a controlled maelstrom. News of Ava Thompson's live, on-air arrest had spread like a contagion, and the building was now besieged by reporters from every local and national outlet, all clamoring for information, for access, for a statement from the mayor or the police commissioner. Captain Isabella Rossi had established a temporary command post in a large conference room, attempting to manage the spiraling crisis while also initiating the first steps of what was clearly going to be a massive internal and inevitably external investigation. Ava Thompson, her handcuffs removed, was given a bottle of water and a quiet space to compose herself. David Lee, her news director, had arrived, accompanied by a team of Channel 8's top legal counsel, including a renowned First Amendment attorney, who had been on retainer with the network for years for just such a contingency. They were already strategizing not just Ava's defense against Moretti's ludicrous charges, which everyone knew would be dropped, but the network's own potential civil action against the city of Viridia and Sergeant Moretti for unlawful arrest, assault, battery, and egregious violation of First Amendment rights. Sergeant Moretti, meanwhile, was in a separate room being debriefed, a euphemism for a preliminary and deeply uncomfortable interrogation, by Captain Rossi and a grim-faced internal affairs lieutenant who had been rushed to the scene. Moretti's initial bluster had completely evaporated, replaced by a sullen, defensive truculence. He stuck to his increasingly implausible story that Ava Thompson had been obstructing and inciting, but his narrative crumbled under Rossi's calm, persistent questioning and the IA lieutenant's pointed inquiries about his unit's ongoing investigation by Thompson. The existence of multiple high-definition video recordings of the entire incident from various angles made his denials futile. He was caught red-handed in an abuse of power so blatant, so public, that there was no conceivable way to spin it. The mayor and the police commissioner, after a series of frantic, panicked phone calls, finally agreed to a joint press conference. It was a disaster. They looked shaken, unprepared, and their carefully worded statements about due process and a full investigation did little to quell the public and media fury. The footage of Ava's arrest was playing on a loop on every news channel. It was the lead story on every website. The city of Viridia was a national laughingstock, a symbol of out-of-control policing and contempt for the free press. The hidden power of Ava's network, Channel 8, and by extension, the national media apparatus was now fully engaged. This wasn't just a local story anymore. It was a direct assault on the constitutionally protected role of journalism, and the media, in all its forms, was unified in its condemnation. Legal experts, civil rights advocates, journalism professors, and even retired police chiefs were appearing on talk shows, universally decrying Moretti's actions as a dangerous overreach, a chilling example of an attempt to silence investigative reporting through intimidation and force. Within hours, the charges against Ava Thompson were formally dropped by the district attorney's office, accompanied by a profuse, though somewhat belated, apology. The DA, a politically ambitious figure, clearly saw which way the wind was blowing and wanted to distance himself from Moretti's toxic actions as quickly as possible. But Ava and Channel 8 were not content with just dropped charges. They were demanding full accountability. David Lee, in a fiery, on-air editorial that evening, called for Sergeant Moretti's immediate termination and criminal prosecution for assault and civil rights violations. He also called for the complete disbandment of Moretti's CAT unit, presenting a montage of Ava's previous reporting that highlighted a pattern of abuse and corruption within the task force. The whistleblower from within Moretti's unit, now feeling emboldened by the public exposure and assured of protection, agreed to go on record with Ava for a follow-up interview, providing even more damning details about the unit's illicit activities. The Viridia City Council called an emergency session. The pressure was unbearable. They were inundated with calls from outraged constituents, from national civil rights organizations, from business leaders concerned about the city's image and the potential economic fallout. Sergeant Moretti, who had sought to silence one reporter, had instead ignited a citywide, and soon to be nationwide, demand for systemic reform within the VPD. His attempt to control the narrative had resulted in him losing control of everything. The camera he had tried to seize had become the instrument of his public crucifixion, its unblinking eye broadcasting his downfall to millions. The investigation into his actions was no longer just an internal affair. It was a public spectacle, and the verdict, in the court of public opinion, was already in. Guilty as charged. The termination of Sergeant Vincent Vinnie Moretti from the Viridia Police Department was swift and unceremonious. Faced with irrefutable video evidence of his assault on Ava Thompson, a cascade of corroborating witness testimonies, including from fellow officers appalled by his conduct, and the immense political and public pressure, the police commissioner had no choice but to fire him for gross misconduct, abuse of authority, and violations of departmental policy so numerous they filled a multi-page report. The police union, while obligated to make a token gesture of protest, knew Moretti was indefensible and quietly distanced themselves. His 18-year career, built on bluster, brutality, and a carefully cultivated aura of untouchability, ended not with a bang but with a termination letter and a perp walk out of his own precinct, captured ironically by a throng of news cameras. But Ava Thompson and Channel 8 News, backed by a formidable legal team and buoyed by overwhelming public support, were not satisfied with just Moretti's dismissal. They pursued both criminal charges against him and a sweeping civil lawsuit against Moretti, his supervising officers who were accused of negligent retention and failure to supervise, and the city of Viridia for fostering a culture that allowed such abuses to flourish. The district attorney, under intense scrutiny, convened a grand jury which, after reviewing the evidence, indicted Moretti on multiple charges including felony assault, battery, official oppression, and violation of civil rights. His trial, when it eventually occurred, was a media sensation, with Ava Thompson providing calm, compelling testimony about his campaign of intimidation and the assault itself. Moretti was found guilty and sentenced to a significant prison term, a stunning downfall for a once-feared police sergeant. The citywide anti-crime task force, CAT, Moretti's personal fiefdom, was immediately disbanded by order of the city council. A comprehensive audit of its past cases revealed a disturbing pattern of rights violations, coerced confessions, and planted evidence, leading to several wrongful convictions being overturned. The unit's entire budget was reallocated, much of it going towards funding a newly empowered and genuinely independent civilian oversight board for the VPD, a key demand of Ava's reporting and community activists for years. The city of Viridia was forced into a period of profound and painful introspection and reform. The Moretti scandal became a catalyst for a top-to-bottom review of VPD policies, training, and accountability mechanisms. A new police commissioner was brought in from outside, tasked with rebuilding community trust and implementing lasting changes. Ava Thompson's investigative series on the CAT unit, now vindicated and amplified by her own ordeal, won numerous prestigious journalism awards, including a Peabody. She continued her fearless reporting, her credibility, and her platform larger than ever, a testament to her courage and her network's unwavering support for press freedom. The legacy of that live, on-air arrest was a Veridia transformed. The city's police department, though still facing challenges, was on a path to greater transparency and accountability. The power of citizen journalism and the critical role of a free press in holding power accountable were reaffirmed, and Sergeant Vinnie Moretti became a poster child for police misconduct, his name a permanent stain on the reputation of the VPD, a cautionary tale of how arrogance, corruption, and an attempt to silence the truth could lead to an officer's own spectacular nationally televised downfall. Ava Thompson had sought to expose a crime. In the end, the perpetrator had exposed himself, live and in color, for the entire world to see. The on-air arrest and assault of investigative reporter Ava Thompson by Sergeant Moretti was a chilling display of authoritarian overreach, a naked attempt to silence a journalist who dared to expose corruption. Moretti's actions, fueled by a toxic combination of arrogance, rage, and a deluded sense of impunity, were a direct attack not only on Ava personally, but on the fundamental principles of a free press and the public's right to know. He sought to make an example of her, to intimidate her into silence. Instead, he made himself an example of precisely the kind of corrupt, abusive power Ava was committed to exposing. This story is a powerful affirmation of the critical role investigative journalism plays in a democratic society. Ava Thompson's courage, her meticulous pursuit of truth in the face of intimidation, and her composure even while being unlawfully arrested are an inspiration. Her hidden power was not just her journalistic skill, but the unwavering support of her news organization, the loyalty of her crew, and, most crucially, the unblinking eye of the camera that transformed her victimization into a live broadcast of Moretti's crime. In trying to seize the camera, Moretti only amplified its power to reveal his own guilt to millions. The swift and overwhelming public and institutional condemnation of Moretti's actions, followed by his termination, criminal conviction, and the disbandment of his corrupt unit, underscores a vital truth. Even entrenched power can be dismantled when confronted with irrefutable evidence and a united front of outrage and demand for accountability. The media, in this instance, did not just report the story, it became the story, and in doing so, catalyzed a significant movement for police reform within Veridia. The legacy of this event is a potent reminder that a free and fearless press is one of the most crucial safeguards against tyranny and corruption. It highlights the dangers journalists face when they challenge powerful interests, but also the immense impact they can have when they refuse to be silenced. It also serves as a stark warning to those in authority who might contemplate abusing their power. In the age of omnipresent cameras and instantaneous global communication, your actions may not only be recorded, but broadcast to the world, your downfall televised for all to see. If this story of a courageous reporter, a corrupt cop's public self-destruction, and the media's power to effect change resonated with you, please support our channel. Like this video, subscribe for more compelling narratives of justice, and hit that notification bell. We value your voice in these discussions. What are your thoughts on the role of the media in holding power accountable? Share your comments below. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these vital stories to light. Thank you for watching.